That night, right in front of their 3 newborns, he pointed at the cradle and screamed, "3 mouths to feed, nothing but a burden. You and these brats are dragging me into the mud. I deserve a rich woman, not a poor, worthless wife like you." Then he stormed out with his wealthy mistress, leaving his young wife trembling in the cold kitchen, clutching her crying babies. Perhaps you've never lived through it, but you can understand that pain. When the one you trusted most turns his back, when a home turns to ashes in a single night, and when a father calls the cries of his own children a burden. That woman, Olivia Johnson, fell to her knees. But through the tears and despair, a silent vow ignited in her heart. They may call my children a curse, but to me, they are destiny's proof. One day, these very children will make the world bow its head. And from that moment of anguish, the fate of this small family veered onto a path no one could have imagined. If you want to follow this journey, don't forget to subscribe. Every bit of support is the strength that allows us to keep telling stories that move hearts. Olivia collapsed onto the cold floor, her body too weak to hold itself upright. She clutched her babies close, their tiny cries echoing in the dim silence. Tears blurred her vision as her arms shook, but she refused to let go. Every sob tore through her chest, each breath heavier than the last. Her mind screamed with questions. Why me? What did I do to deserve this? But her lips pressed against Malik's forehead, whispering comfort he could not yet understand. The salt of her tears mixed with the softness of their skin. Though her body trembled, her eyes burned with something deeper than pain. Beneath the sorrow, a fragile spark flickered. It was the stubborn flame of survival. Even when abandoned, even when humiliated, she knew she had no choice but to keep breathing. For them. The room was small, the walls cracked, the night unforgiving. Yet, in that silence, a promise formed inside her heart. She would not surrender. She would not let her children be swallowed by despair. Every cry pierced her, but every cry also reminded her she was still here. Broken, yes. Weary, yes. But alive. And as long as she was alive, there was still hope. Days later, Marcus brought Olivia to his parents' home. She hoped for kindness, or even a little understanding. Instead, the evening turned into a cruel display. Around the polished dining table, Margaret Williams, S.O.C., his mother, looked her up and down with disdain. She cannot even hold herself together. How will she raise 3 children? Her words cut like glass. George, his father, laughed harshly. She is nothing but a burden. Marcus deserves better. Look at her. Weak, poor, worthless. The sound of his laughter filled the room, sharper than any blade. Olivia lowered her gaze, her arms tightening around her babies as if to shield them. Heat burned her cheeks. Shame pressed on her chest until she could hardly breathe. Every bite of food, every clink of glass became a judgment. They did not see her sacrifice. They did not see her devotion. They saw only failure. In that house of plenty, she felt emptier than ever. Surrounded by wealth, she was stripped of dignity. Her children whimpered softly, unaware of the cruelty. She kissed their heads, whispering promises no one else would hear. At that table, Olivia understood. She was utterly alone. The evening darkened. Marcus stood, his voice cutting through the room. "Enough," he said, though his tone carried no defense for Olivia. His hand reached out, but not to her. He extended it to Eleanor Reed, the wealthy widow who sat across the table, dressed in jewels and pride. "I will not waste my life on weakness," Marcus declared. His words were final, sharp, cruel. "Olivia, you are no longer my wife. From this day, you and those children are nothing to me." The room erupted in murmurs, some mocking, some eager to agree. Eleanor's lips curved in a cold smile as she accepted his hand. Together, they stood, united in betrayal. Olivia's breath caught in her throat. Her knees trembled as tears slid down her cheeks. The babies stirred, sensing her fear. Malik whimpered. Aaliyah clung tighter. Jordan pressed his face into her chest. She held them close, but she could not shield them from the sting of rejection. Their father had chosen another woman. Their family was torn apart in one merciless declaration. The sound of laughter filled the air, but Olivia heard only the breaking of her own heart. Marcus's eyes hardened as he turned back to Olivia. His voice dripped with contempt. "One day, you and your cursed children will beg on the streets while I dine with kings." Each word was heavy, meant to crush, meant to humiliate. Laughter rippled through the room. Margaret smirked. George chuckled. Eleanor leaned closer to Marcus, her triumph complete. Every sound stabbed into Olivia's soul. Her hands tightened around her children. They squirmed, their cries soft, but her voice rose above the noise. Whispering fiercely into their ears, she said, "They see burdens. I see blessings." She kissed each tiny forehead, holding them as if her arms were a shield against the storm. Her body trembled, but her heart carved the words into memory. They would never forget what was spoken tonight. The mocking voices grew louder. Plates clinked, glasses rang, cruelty echoed. Yet, within Olivia, a seed was planted. Pain twisted into determination. Humiliation became the soil where resilience would grow. Marcus believed his curse sealed her fate. But deep inside, Olivia clung to a truth only she could see. Her children were not curses. They were her reason to fight, her reason to rise. Life after Marcus's curse became a blur of exhaustion and hunger. Olivia took work wherever she could find it. She scrubbed floors until her hands cracked and bled. She carried buckets of water up steep stairs, her back bent, her body aching. At night, she came home with nothing but coins, never enough to fill 4 stomachs. The children cried for food, their tiny hands reaching out. Olivia broke a piece of stale bread, placing it into their mouths. She chewed the last dry crust, then stopped, pretending she was full. Her belly growled, but she smiled weakly. She whispered, "See, Mama is satisfied." When they finally drifted to sleep, Olivia sat in the silence, clutching her empty stomach. Hunger twisted inside her, yet she refused to take from her children. She prayed quietly, asking for strength, asking for tomorrow. Her body grew thin, her clothes worn, but her will did not break. In every sacrifice, in every skipped meal, she chose them over herself. The world saw a woman falling apart, but in truth, every act of surrender became proof of her strength. She was not weak. She was a mother keeping her family alive, one crumb at a time. One afternoon, Olivia walked through the marketplace, her basket nearly empty. She searched for vegetables she could afford. The sun was harsh, the air thick with noise. Then a shadow passed. A sleek black car rolled to a stop, polished and gleaming. Marcus stepped out, dressed in a fine suit. At his side stood Eleanor Reed, her diamonds flashing in the light. They spotted Olivia instantly. Marcus smirked, his voice loud enough for others to hear. "So, this is what you've become, a beggar in rags." Eleanor pulled a coin from her purse. She held it high, then let it dangle between her fingers. "Here," she said with mock sweetness, "buy yourself something nice." The crowd laughed, eyes fixed on the broken woman before them. Olivia's cheeks burned, but she did not bow. She lifted her head, her children pressed close to her skirts. Without a word, she turned and walked away. Her steps were steady, her dignity unshaken. The coin slipped back into Eleanor's hand. Marcus's laughter echoed, but Olivia's silence was louder. She carried nothing in her basket, yet she carried pride no one could strip away. News of Olivia's struggles spread quickly. In her neighborhood, whispers turned into sharp words. Mrs. Turner, the woman who lived across the street, became the loudest voice. She often stood on her porch, calling out to anyone who would listen. "Olivia Johnson is proof of failure," she sneered. "A woman abandoned, a woman cursed. Look at her children. Nothing good will come from them." The words stung, sharper than hunger, heavier than labor. Each insult was a stone thrown at Olivia's back. Neighbors shook their heads, some pitying, most mocking. Children pointed at Malik, Aaliyah, and Jordan, repeating the cruel words they had heard at home. Olivia felt her chest tighten, her eyes fill. But she would not let her children see her break. She knelt down, pulling them close, her voice firm though her throat ached. "You are not curses," she told them. "You are hope." She kissed each face, wiping their tears with calloused hands. The world could say what it wished, but she planted her truth into their hearts. Even in the darkest hours, she wanted them to believe. They were not a burden. They were her reason to keep breathing. One evening, as Olivia sat outside mending clothes, an old man watched from across the street. Mr. Anderson, a retired businessman, had lived quietly in the neighborhood for years. His eyes lingered on the children, who played with broken toys yet argued about numbers and shapes as if they were puzzles to be solved. Curiosity drew him closer. "Your children," he said gently. "They are sharp. They see the world differently." Olivia looked up, wary at first, but Mr. Anderson's gaze was kind, steady, without judgment. He continued, "I once built companies. I know talent when I see it. Let me teach them. Reading, numbers, even how to think beyond these streets." Her heart hesitated. She had learned not to trust offers too easily, but something in his voice felt genuine, like a lifeline thrown across a storm. She agreed, and so, evenings turned into lessons. At his table, the children traced letters, solved sums, asked questions that stretched beyond their years. For the first time, Olivia saw a future flicker before her eyes. Mr. Anderson's presence was more than charity. It was a doorway, opening quietly into a world she had never dared imagine. The lessons grew, and so did the children. Malik's hands were never still. He dismantled radios, clocks, anything broken he could find. His eyes lit with fascination each time he pieced them back together. Jordan, quieter, kept notebooks filled with numbers. He calculated prices, counted coins, and even balanced imaginary accounts. When Mr. Anderson asked him to explain, his answers were crisp, exact, far beyond his age. Aaliyah carried a different strength. She spoke for her brothers, asked bold questions, and led their games with natural authority. Even in play, she organized, she inspired. She carried herself like someone who believed in tomorrow. Olivia watched with awe. Each child bore scars of hardship, yet their gifts shone through. The world had mocked them, called them curses. But under guidance, under love, those curses looked more like blessings every day. Mr. Anderson often shook his head with wonder. "These children," he told Olivia, "they are destined for something greater." She listened, her heart swelling, but also trembling. The road was still cruel, the nights still hungry. Yet within her, hope grew stronger. Her children were not the end of her story. They were the beginning of something no one could yet see. Night after night, Olivia tucked her children into bed. The room was small, the blankets thin, but her voice wrapped them in warmth. She stroked Malik's hair, kissed Jordan's cheek, held Aaliyah's hand. Then she whispered the same words, steady and sure. "Rise so high the world cannot deny your worth." The children listened, their eyes wide in the dim light. They did not yet understand the weight of her promise, but they felt its strength. Each night it became a lullaby, a shield, a vow that carried them into sleep. Sometimes her voice trembled with exhaustion, but she never stopped. Even when her own hope was faint, she gave them hers. Words became the gift she could always afford. As days grew into years, that mantra rooted itself deep inside them. It was more than comfort. It was instruction. Olivia's voice reminded them that no insult, no hunger, no rejection could erase their value. She carried their dreams in her chest, but she also placed a seed of belief in theirs. In silence, she prayed those words would one day bloom into something greater than she could imagine. The years passed, but hardship remained. The community often turned cruel. Children mocked Malik, Aaliyah, and Jordan, repeating the words their parents had whispered at home. "The cursed kids," they called them, "the useless ones." At the market, women shook their heads. "They'll end up like their mother, nothing." Men smirked, dismissing them as wasted lives. The sting of judgment was constant, echoing wherever they went. But the children did not lower their eyes. Malik's gaze shone with restless curiosity, Jordan's with quiet calculation, Aaliyah's with unshaken resolve. Their hearts had been tempered by whispers harsher than hunger. Olivia heard every cruel word, but she saw something different in her children. They no longer bowed under scorn. They stood taller, their eyes clear, their spirits steady. One night, after another day of ridicule, Aaliyah looked at her mother and said, "They don't know us." Olivia's chest filled with pride. The world mocked, but her children had learned to fight with silence and determination. From the outside, they still looked like the abandoned family. But inside, strength was growing, silent and unstoppable, waiting for its time. 15 years turned pain into power. Malik, once a curious boy with broken radios, became a genius in technology. His hands built systems no one else dared to design. Jordan grew into a man of numbers, his sharp mind able to see patterns and profits hidden to others. He could turn scarcity into strategy. And Aaliyah, fierce, bold, unshaken, became their leader. She carried her mother's voice in every decision. People followed her not just for her words, but for the fire in her eyes. Together, they built something new. What began as lessons at a neighbor's table grew into a vision larger than their street, larger than their city. They created Anderson Innovations, a company that blended Malik's inventions, Jordan's precision, and Aaliyah's leadership. Olivia stood behind them, no longer carrying them in her arms but still carrying them in her heart. Her whispers had taken root. The world that once called them curses would soon learn their names, and this time those names would echo not in shame, but in triumph. The company's first creation was small, yet powerful, a device designed by Malik, refined by Jordan, and championed by Aaliyah. It solved a problem others ignored, simple yet brilliant. At first, no one believed in them. Doors closed, investors laughed, critics dismissed them as children of misfortune. But persistence wore down resistance. One customer became 2, then 10, then hundreds. News spread. Articles appeared. Local papers began calling them the Howard siblings of Atlanta, linking their rise to the old man who once believed in them. Cameras flashed, microphones crowded their path, eager to hear the story behind the invention. The world that had once ridiculed them now leaned forward in curiosity. Aaliyah spoke with grace. Malik explained with passion. Jordan added quiet authority. For Olivia, it was the first time she saw her children honored, not mocked. She watched from the side, tears filling her eyes, as the seed of her whispers grew into a tree reaching toward the sky. This was only the beginning. Success had finally cracked open the door, and behind that door, a new world waited for them to enter. While Olivia's family rose, Marcus's world began to collapse. The wealth he chased with Eleanor Reed crumbled beneath him. Investments soured, partners withdrew, debts piled high. Eleanor's ventures faltered, her empire shrinking by the day. The parties grew smaller, the laughter quieter, the luxury fading like a dying flame. Friends who once praised Marcus disappeared, leaving only silence and unpaid bills. Eleanor's patience thinned, her voice sharp with blame. Marcus, once proud, now wore worry across his face. He looked in the mirror and saw not the man who had abandoned his family, but a shadow weighed down by loss. The fine suits no longer fit, the car sat unused, the table once full, now barren. The promise of dining with kings had vanished. What remained was the taste of failure. While Anderson Innovations made headlines, Marcus and Eleanor hid from them. Each success of Olivia's children echoed like judgment, reminding him of the words he once spat in cruelty. The contrast was stark, one family rising from ashes, another sinking into ruin. The curse Marcus had spoken now circled back to him, heavy and merciless. Eleanor Reed's empire was falling, and with every loss her anger grew sharper. One night, she faced Marcus across the empty dining table, her voice cold. "You are nothing but dead weight," she spat. "I carried you long enough. You bring me nothing but failure." Marcus tried to argue, but his words stumbled. Eleanor's eyes were already fixed on the door. "Leave," she said. "Take your debts with you. You disgust me." The door slammed, and Marcus found himself alone, stripped of the wealth he had betrayed his family for. He wandered the streets, his fine suit torn at the edges, pockets empty. Neighbors who once envied him now pointed, whispering with cruel delight. Some laughed outright, mocking the man who once boasted of dining with kings. He begged for credit in shops, but was turned away. He pleaded for help from old friends, but they looked past him. His pride had withered, his arrogance replaced by shame. Each step through the city was heavy with scorn. The man who had abandoned his wife and children now knew the taste of abandonment himself. His curse had returned to him, bitter and complete. One morning, Marcus drifted into a small cafe, desperate for warmth. The television mounted on the wall flickered with news. At first, he paid no attention until he heard names that froze him in place. Malik Johnson, Jordan Johnson, and Aaliyah Johnson, the young leaders of Anderson Innovations, have been listed among America's youngest billionaires. Marcus's breath caught. His eyes locked on the screen. There they stood, 3 confident young adults dressed with elegance, faces glowing with pride. Cameras flashed as they shook hands with leaders and innovators. The world clapped for them, cheered for them. The anchor continued. Once raised in hardship by their mother, Olivia Johnson, these siblings are now rewriting history. Marcus felt his chest tighten. Memories surged. The night he called them curses, the night he left them bleeding and broken. Now those same children stood higher than he had ever dreamed. His hands trembled. Shame swallowed him whole. He realized the wealth he chased had turned to dust, while the family he abandoned had risen to glory. The reversal was merciless. He had lost everything, and they had gained the world. Marcus could not escape the images. His children's success filled every headline, every screen, every street poster. The more he saw, the more desperate he became. He convinced himself there was still a place for him in their lives, a chance to reclaim what he had thrown away. He pulled out his old suit, once fine, but now faded and frayed. He polished his worn shoes until they shone faintly. He stared at himself in the mirror, trying to see the man he once was. Instead, he saw only a hollow face lined with regret. When news broke of a grand gala in New York, celebrating the achievements of Anderson Innovations, Marcus made his choice. He would be there. He told himself it was to apologize, to explain. But deep inside, greed whispered louder. Perhaps he could stand in their light, share in their triumph, be lifted once more. He boarded a bus with borrowed money, his heart pounding with fear and anticipation. Each mile closer to the city felt heavier. By the time he arrived, the suit clung uncomfortably, but his mind clung to one thought. He would face them, and somehow he would find a way back in. The gala shone like a palace of glass. Lights sparkled, music swelled, and the air buzzed with celebration. Inside, journalists and dignitaries filled the hall, their voices rising in admiration. At the center stood Malik, Jordan, and Aaliyah, the siblings once mocked as curses. They were now honored as innovators, pioneers, leaders of a new generation. Cameras followed their every move, capturing the glow of success. Then Olivia appeared, dressed in simple elegance. Her smile was soft, but her eyes gleamed with pride. She walked with calm grace, no longer the woman abandoned in shadows, but the mother of triumph. Guests turned to her with respect, recognizing the quiet strength behind the story. The applause grew louder, a thunderous chorus that shook the hall. Olivia's gaze never left her children. She did not need the spotlight. Their light was hers. Marcus stood hidden in the crowd, his heart twisting. He saw what he had thrown away, what he had cursed. The contrast was unbearable, their radiance against his ruin. The night belonged to them. For Olivia and her children, it was the dawn of vindication. For Marcus, it was the weight of regret pressing deeper with every cheer. When the applause settled, Aaliyah stepped forward to speak. Her presence filled the hall, her voice clear and steady. "Once we were called curses," she began. "We were told we were nothing. We were told we would drag the world down." The audience listened, silent, captivated. Malik stood beside her, Jordan just behind, their faces proud yet solemn. Aaliyah's eyes searched the crowd, then lifted toward the lights. "But today, we stand here not as burdens, but as proof. Proof that blessings rise, even from the harshest soil." Her words struck deep. The hall erupted in applause, rising to its feet. Guests clapped, cheered, some even wept. The siblings bowed their heads slightly, humbled yet victorious. Olivia wiped a tear from her cheek. She had whispered those words night after night. Now her daughter declared them to the world, turning pain into power. In the corner, Marcus's breath caught. Each clap felt like thunder against his chest. The speech he listened to was not just victory, it was a verdict. The hall roared with praise, a chorus that would echo far beyond the gala. For Aaliyah, Malik, Jordan, and Olivia, it was the sound of destiny fulfilled. The applause still echoed when a sudden commotion rippled through the hall. From the crowd, a figure pushed forward, his suit worn, his face lined with desperation. Cameras turned, flashes burst, voices rose in confusion. Marcus Williams stumbled into the light, his eyes wide, his voice shaking but loud enough to pierce the silence. "It's me!" he cried. "It's me, your father!" Gasps spread like wildfire. Guests turned to one another, stunned. Journalists lifted their cameras higher, capturing every second. The siblings froze, their bodies stiff, their faces unreadable. For a moment, the gala seemed suspended in time. The proud celebration of triumph now tangled with the raw intrusion of a man long forgotten. Olivia's breath caught as she watched from her seat. Her heart trembled, but her eyes narrowed with calm fury. Marcus stood before them, trembling, but defiant enough to claim what he had lost. The flashes lit his hollow face, exposing not a father's pride, but a beggar's plea. The hall waited, holding its breath. Every eye turned toward the family, waiting to see what they would say, waiting to see how the story of betrayal would meet its long-awaited confrontation. Marcus's voice cracked under the weight of silence. He spread his arms as if reaching for his children, though none moved closer. "I made mistakes," he stammered, sweat glistening on his brow. "I was young. I was foolish. Forgive me. Please, forgive me." His words spilled quickly, desperate, flimsy against the memory of what he had done. The guests shifted uneasily. Some whispered in shock, others frowned in judgment. The scene was raw, uncomfortable, painful to watch. Marcus's hands trembled as he pressed them together. "I am still your father," he insisted. "No matter what I did, blood cannot be denied." His eyes darted between Malik, Jordan, and Aaliyah, searching for sympathy, for even the smallest crack in their armor. But none came. Their faces remained firm, their bodies still. The applause had vanished, replaced by an echo of his own words hanging in the air. His plea was weak, powerless against years of abandonment. He wanted forgiveness without sacrifice, acceptance without change. The hall could see it. Everyone could see it. The man who once cursed his family now begged for scraps of mercy. His voice shook, but his children did not waver. The silence broke with Jordan's voice, steady and cold. "Mistakes," he repeated. His eyes pierced Marcus like a blade. "Mistakes are forgetting a birthday. Mistakes are raising your voice. What you did was not a mistake. You spat on us. You abandoned us." Malik stepped forward, his voice sharp. "You cursed us. You said we would beg. You left us to starve while you lived in comfort. That is not a mistake. That is cruelty." Jordan's words followed, quiet but unshakable. "We always mattered. You just didn't see it. You chose not to see it." The hall murmured in agreement, the truth undeniable. Olivia watched with tears in her eyes, but they were not tears of pain. They were tears of pride. Her children stood strong, unafraid, their voices carrying the weight of justice. Marcus staggered back as if struck. His mouth opened, but no defense came. The truth pressed down on him, heavier than any burden he had ever known. The confrontation was not violent, yet it cut deeper than any blow. The children he had once cursed now stood in judgment, their words echoing louder than his desperate pleas. The world was watching, and they had spoken. Olivia rose from her seat. The hall fell silent once more, every eye turning toward her. She walked slowly to the stage, her presence calm, yet every step heavy with authority. She faced Marcus, her gaze unflinching. Her voice was steady, soft, but sharp enough to pierce the air. "A father does not abandon," she said. "A father protects. A father sacrifices. You forfeited that title long ago." The crowd absorbed her words, the weight undeniable. Cameras clicked, but no sound could overpower her truth. Marcus's lips trembled. "Olivia, please." She raised a hand, silencing him. "Do not speak my name. You gave it away the night you left me bleeding with 3 infants in my arms. You gave it away when you chose wealth over flesh and blood." Her children stood taller beside her, their strength a reflection of her own. Olivia's eyes glistened, but no weakness showed. Her tears were not of sorrow, but of release. "You are not our family," she concluded, "and you never will be again." The judgment was final. The hall erupted in applause, not for cruelty, but for the strength of a mother who had endured and triumphed. As the applause thundered, Aaliyah stepped forward, her voice clear and cutting through the roar. She looked directly at Marcus, her words sharp with truth. "You said we would beg on the streets while you dined with kings." Her tone was steady, yet filled with fire. She extended her arms toward the glittering hall. "Look around, Marcus. We are the ones feasting with kings." The crowd erupted, clapping, shouting, cheering her on. Cameras flashed as the siblings stood united, their triumph undeniable. Aaliyah's eyes narrowed, her voice dropping lower, almost tender, but deadly in its certainty. "And you," she said, "you are the one begging." The hall exploded. The words struck Marcus harder than any blow. Guests rose to their feet, their applause deafening. Some cried, others cheered, all swept into the power of justice delivered full circle. Marcus's shoulders slumped. His eyes darted helplessly, searching for escape, but there was none. The irony was complete, cruel yet righteous. Olivia's children had risen exactly as she always whispered they would. They had turned his curse into their crown. The final blow was not violence, it was truth, and it left Marcus broken, with nothing left but shame. The hall was still buzzing when another figure arrived. Eleanor Reed, dressed in silks and jewels, stepped confidently into the spotlight. Her smile was wide, but her eyes cold. She raised her voice so the reporters could hear. "We should put the past behind us," she declared. "With my experience and their brilliance, imagine what we could build together." Flashes went off, microphones lifted, the crowd eager for drama. Eleanor gestured gracefully toward the siblings as if she owned part of their triumph, but Malik spoke first, firm and unyielding. You mocked our mother when she was weakest." Jordan's voice followed, sharp as steel. "You called us worthless before the world." Aaliyah stepped forward, eyes locked on Eleanor. "Now that we have power, you come to share in it. But you were never here when we cried, when we starved, when we fought to live." Reporters scribbled, cameras zoomed in. The truth cut deeper than any headline. Eleanor's face tightened, her charm faltering under the weight of exposure. The siblings did not shout. They only revealed, and the world saw clearly. Behind Eleanor's wealth was cruelty. Behind her charm was betrayal. The applause rose again, this time against her. The moment shattered Eleanor's image. She stepped back, her smile fading as whispers spread across the hall. Reporters turned their cameras from her jewels to her shame. Questions were shouted, each one harsher than the last. She glanced at Marcus, hoping for support, but he stood frozen, broken, already drowning in his own disgrace. Her lips curled in disgust. "You are worthless," she hissed, before walking away, leaving him exposed to the storm. The spotlight swung back to Marcus. He tried to speak, but the crowd roared louder. Journalists shouted over him. The man who abandoned his family for greed. The man who lost everything. The man who cursed his own children. His name spread across screens, not in honor, but in ridicule. Social feeds lit up, headlines multiplied. He was no longer remembered for success. He was remembered as the man who had destroyed himself with arrogance. Marcus covered his face, but it was too late. Shame had no shadows to hide in. The family he once abandoned now stood tall, while he was left stripped of dignity, stripped of love, stripped of everything. He had dined with kings in his dreams. In reality, he begged before the world. The chaos subsided as Olivia stepped forward. She reached for her children, her arms wide, her heart full. Malik, Jordan, and Aaliyah embraced her tightly on stage. The hall quieted, then rose to its feet in unison. Tears streamed down Olivia's cheeks as she looked at them, not as billionaires, not as public figures, but as the children she had once held in a dark room, alone and abandoned. Now they were her proof, her vindication, her living triumph. The applause swelled. It was not only for innovation, not only for success. It was for survival, for resilience, for love that had outlasted betrayal. Olivia whispered through her tears, words meant only for her children, though the hall felt them all the same. "You are my blessings, always." The crowd erupted again, moved not by spectacle but by truth. Cameras captured the embrace, the moment of victory, not of wealth, but of family united. Where once they were mocked, they now stood as symbols of strength. The stage held no shame, only honor. Their triumph was not against Marcus or Eleanor, their triumph was for each other. Love had won, and the world cheered its victory. The story did not end with wealth or applause. Olivia and her children turned their triumph into purpose. Together, they announced the creation of a foundation dedicated to women left behind, women who had been told they were nothing. Funds were directed to provide education, shelter, and opportunity for mothers struggling as Olivia once had. The halls that had echoed with ridicule now echoed with hope. Families once broken by abandonment found lifelines. Children once dismissed as burdens discovered paths to grow. Olivia visited the centers herself, speaking softly to women who cried at her words. "You are not alone. You are not a curse. You are worthy." The community began to shift. Where there had been whispers of shame, there were now stories of triumph. Newspapers that once mocked her family now celebrated their work. The legacy was no longer only about survival. It was about lifting others, ensuring no woman would feel the loneliness Olivia had once carried. From sacrifice grew strength. From betrayal grew compassion. From pain grew a legacy that stretched beyond one family, reaching into the lives of many. Their story had become a gift to the world. Betrayal may wound, but love, perseverance, and faith build legacies no money can buy. Olivia Johnson and her children proved that no curse can silence determination, and no abandonment can erase love. From nights of hunger to halls of triumph, they carried their pain and turned it into power. The words once spoken against them became the fire that lifted them higher. What was meant to break them only forged their strength. Their story is not only about wealth. It is about dignity reclaimed, about love that never surrendered, about faith that carried them through the darkest nights. Olivia's whispered promise lived on in every step her children took until the world could no longer deny their worth. To every heart listening, remember, no matter how deep the betrayal, no matter how heavy the burden, You are never defined by the cruelty of others. You are defined by the courage to rise. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs hope. Leave your thoughts below. What part of Olivia's journey spoke to you the most? And subscribe so that stories of love, resilience, and faith continue to find their way to you.